When I got pregnant with my first son, I honestly thought that I had to stop all exercise. I thought like Pilates and dance, yoga, running, I thought all of it was out of question. And this is what my family and friends made it seem like. I remember when I told my parents that I was pregnant, they were immediately questioning, like, you're not dancing anymore, right? Like, you stopped running, right? You're not going to the gym anymore and lifting weights. And that made me really scared, because I was like, I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what was right and what was not right. I had no clue what was okay during pregnancy to do and what was not. And I felt so lost, because there are so many old wives' tales that exist that scare women into thinking that their bodies are like super fragile when they're pregnant. People tell people to just like stop all exercise and just do nothing. And that just didn't feel right to me, if I had to be totally honest, because I felt physically fine to be able to do this stuff. I didn't feel restricted. And so I was like, something feels off here. And that's when I started to dig into the research and realized that pregnant women can actually exercise. And not only that, but they can exercise pretty hard too. So in this episode, I wanted to kind of talk about what exercise is okay during pregnancy, what is not, talk about how you can approach your exercise program if and when you become pregnant, and talk about how to personalize the experience so that you're doing what's right for your body and your pregnancy, and you're not listening to everyone's voices outside that are not based in any kind of scientific evidence. And there's been such really, really good research done in the last decade on pregnant women and exercise that I'm super excited to share, because I think it'll kind of dispel some of the fears that you have about exercise during pregnancy. So let's just get into it. For you to really not be scared of exercise, I think it's important to understand what's happening in your body when you're pregnant, right? So one of the most important things that happens when you get pregnant is that your blood volume increases by up to 50%. So in the second and third trimester, you have 50% more blood than you did prior to pregnancy. That is a lot of extra blood and fluid to be carrying around. And so that means your heart is working that much harder to pump all that blood up and down your body, into all your organs, into all your cells. So when it comes to exercise, you are going to feel more fatigued faster, because your heart is already working faster. It's already beating 10, 20 beats per minute faster when you're pregnant. When you add exercise on top of that, it's going to raise your heart rate even more. So you will be getting your heart rate high faster, and so you'll feel fatigued faster. That's just the reality of being pregnant and exercising. Another thing that happens when you're pregnant is that your oxygen consumption increases as well. You're taking in more oxygen. Your diaphragm actually increases in size so that you can breathe more oxygen in and give that oxygen to your baby. So this means that you're gonna get winded more quickly, because as you exercise, your oxygen demands increase even more. And so that's gonna mean that you're gonna feel winded faster. Another thing that happens with pregnancy is that there's this hormone called relaxin that gets released more and more as you get more and more pregnant. And the goal of this is to loosen your joints and ligaments so that you can deliver the baby through the pelvis. So especially in the hip and pelvis region, your joints and ligaments will become looser and more jelly-like. So this means that you have to be a lot more careful with the type of exercises that you do, not to overdo stretching and stuff, because you're more prone to tearing a ligament or a joint or whatever if you go too far. And the last thing I would say, the last change that's noticeable, is that your metabolic rate increases. So you are burning more calories at rest when you're pregnant. On average, you can be burning, depending on what trimester you're in and how active you are, you could be burning anywhere between 300 to 700 extra calories a day. So these changes are super important for you to know, because then they tell you how you should adjust your exercise, right? So if you know that you're gonna get winded faster, you know that your heart rate's gonna go up faster, then you don't need to stop exercise. It's not like it's bad to get your heart rate up, or it's bad to, push your body to utilize oxygen more. None of these are bad things. It just means that you just have to adjust the intensity. So instead of going super intense, maybe you reduce the intensity of the same exercises that you were doing prior to pregnancy. So take these changes into mind when we're talking about how we want to think about pregnancy and exercise. So for me, for example, my routine during pregnancy doesn't actually change that much compared to prior to pregnancy. So I still dance about 4 times a week. I do a bar workout once on the weekends, and then I'm lifting about 2 or 3 times a week at the gym. And then I will throw in a couple, like 2 or 3 yoga sessions into the mix just to keep my joints and muscles and stuff loose. Since I do a lot of dance and lifting, I can get tight, so I like to kind of balance it out with mobility work. That is pretty high volume for most people, whether they're pregnant or not. That's just what I like to do and what I find helps me keep me in shape to be able to dance the way I want to dance. But for most people, they don't need to be doing that high volume. I would say for most women, whether they're pregnant or not, walking and strength training at least 2 to 4 times a week is plenty enough, and then some mobility work because you want to kind of balance it out. So that's my routine, and the routine stays the same, so I'm not changing the routine. What does change though is the intensity, because in the first trimester, you're not feeling so hot, so I like to just go with how I feel. Like first trimester is literally about survival, so I'm still dancing and stuff, but I'm not doing it as intensely as I was before, just because I don't have the energy. I just want to sleep, and so I might cut down the sessions. I might do more easier pieces that are slower pace, things like that. Same thing with lifting. I get in the gym and I do what I can. Again, first trimester is just about survival. Second trimester though, I actually go back to the intensity that I was doing pre-pregnancy, or close to it. I would say probably 80% of the intensity, because I feel fine the second trimester. I'm not heavy yet. I don't have like a huge belly by then yet, so I'm able to still be somewhat agile and push myself pretty hard. And then as I get to the third trimester, what I do is I naturally slow down. I'm starting to feel heavy, the belly's getting bigger, my blood volume's increased even more, and when you just feel so heavy, it's hard to be agile, and so the intensity goes down. And also I definitely notice in the third trimester that my body has to work way harder to do the same exercises that I was doing in the second trimester, so I'm just being forced to cut down the intensity. With that said, like I said, I still keep my routine because it just allows me to get back in the game faster postpartum. So rather than just cutting everything out, by just staying in the game and just showing up and doing things repeatedly, continuing to refine your technique and form and all of that during pregnancy, when you get back into exercise postpartum, it'll just be a little bit easier for you. You don't have to feel like you're starting from rock bottom, right? So that's what I do for exercise. Now, a lot of people who are watching this, they'll be like, is it really okay to do intense exercise during pregnancy? That sounds very risky. I've heard like you should cut out all intense exercise. And that was a recommendation actually for a long time. Even the ACOG guidelines suggested that your heart rate should not go above a certain rate and you should avoid intense exercise, but that has evolved. So science has evolved. There is really, really robust and good research out there now on pregnant women and exercise showing that even intense exercise is safe, and in fact, it could even be beneficial. So I'm going to read off some of the studies to you now because I think it'll put your mind at ease if you just kind of see that these studies, there's multiple studies that exist. They show that intense exercise is actually not going to harm you. Okay, so let's talk about a few of the studies that exist, right? So there was a HIT study done in 2022 with 69 pregnant women, and they did HIT for 8 weeks and the control group did not. So the people that did the HIT exercise, they not only improved their anaerobic capacity, but they also cut down on body fat, and they didn't see any meaningful increase in risk to their pregnancy. Meanwhile, the people who didn't do HIT, they got less fit and they saw no body composition changes. And then there was another sleep study done in 2022 again, where it was a similar study. There was a HIT group, a group that did HIT and a group that didn't do HIT. And the group that did HIT got an hour more of high quality sleep. So exercise can actually improve your sleep drastically. And so the woman who did HIT, the pregnant woman who did HIT, got so much better sleep. And anyone who's been pregnant knows that sleep is really hard when you're pregnant. Somehow you just get insomnia because of hormones. They make it harder to fall back asleep if you get woken up. And if you have kids, you're definitely getting waken up in the middle of the night. So sleep and pregnancy are a tough topic, but exercise can actually make you sleep better. And I find that to be very true. When I'm exercising and when I'm tired by the end of the day, I can sleep through the night and I can fall asleep faster when I'm pregnant than when I'm not exercising. There was another study done in 2019. It was a birth outcome study where they did a systemic review of 13 other studies, and they found no difference in birth weight between the women who did intense exercise versus those who did not. And the interesting thing is the people who did intense exercise actually had longer gestation periods and a lower risk of preterm labor. So not only did the intense exercise not harm the baby, but it actually benefited the baby by allowing the mothers to be pregnant for longer and deliver healthier babies that are born at term instead of premature. There was another study done on athletic moms. So this study basically looked at 41 competitive athletes who continued to do high volume intensity training and compared it to athletes who did not do that. And the athletes who trained during pregnancy recovered and got back to the sport much faster than the woman who took a break during pregnancy and tried to come back to the sport after it. So like I said, there's multiple studies. Those are just a few of the studies that I found, and there's more coming out as we speak. So there is enough good research out there to show that intense exercise is okay. So if you are worried that your heart rate going up above a certain rate is going to harm your baby, it's not. There's women out there who are running marathons when they're pregnant. They're doing HIIT exercises when they're pregnant. They're doing all kinds of crazy stuff when they're pregnant, and they're fine. With that said though, there are some caveats. So just because all this research exists and you can do intense exercise doesn't mean that you need to do it or that you should do it or that everyone should do it. So there are certain complications that some women have that prevent them from doing exercise. And your doctor will tell you if you're one of those people. So if you have pregnancy complications, I would not recommend doing intense exercise. You can still go for walking, you can do gentle exercise, but not do anything too intense. And I actually wrote a blog post that highlights the guidelines that every single country around the world put together around this topic. So you can take a look at that blog post. I'll link it in the description as well. The other thing is that every woman's body is different. So what might feel okay in my body might not feel okay in your body. So you have to really tune in and figure out what feels right in your body. So your body will tell you if something is not right. So if you have symptoms like any kind of bleeding after exercise or fluid leakage, or you feel dizzy or lightheaded, or you're just like not able to recover after a workout, those are not good signs. Like you should not have all of these unusual symptoms after exercising. You should feel pretty much the same you feel after a normal workout when you're not pregnant. So if you're having any of these symptoms, that probably means you've gone too far or you're not feeling enough or some other reason, and it's just better that you stop the exercise, figure out what's causing the issue and potentially fix it, or just avoid the exercise until you're not pregnant anymore. Another thing that I would caution against is if you've never done intense exercise, I don't think pregnancy is the right time to start it. It doesn't make sense. It only makes sense if you've been doing intense exercise before pregnancy, you can continue it throughout pregnancy. I wouldn't start it though during pregnancy. And there's also a few other things to keep in mind when it comes to exercise during pregnancy. So your body's changing so much, right? Your blood volume's increasing, your belly's getting bigger. And so you're going to have to make modifications to exercise. You're not going to be able to do certain things. And this takes a lot of intentionality and trial and error to figure out what works in your body and what doesn't. I have spent basically 2 pregnancies figuring this out for myself, and I got a certification in prenatal Pilates. So I really know what modifications to make for every position that you're in. So I don't necessarily I don't do like prenatal workouts. I'll just do regular workouts, and I'll just modify positions because I know what modifications to make. So for example, you don't want to be lying supine for a long time, meaning like you don't want to be lying flat on your back for long periods of time beyond your first trimester. This is because when you're lying on your back flat, the pressure from the belly could prevent blood flow going back to the uterus. And you don't want that to happen. You want blood flow going to the uterus, and just it could restrict blood flow overall and just make you dizzy and uncomfortable. So the recommendation that ACOG makes is that you want to elevate yourself up slightly. Even just like 6 to 8 inches is enough elevation so that your shoulders are elevated and your heart's able to pump the blood more efficiently to your uterus and back. So that's the one, for example, modification that you want to make. If there's any exercises in your program that require you to lie on your back, instead of lying on your back, you want to lie slightly elevated. The second thing is, this is going to be obvious to most people, but like you don't want to be lying on your belly after the first trimester. It's just not comfortable. You'll start, you'll feel like you're squishing your baby or something. So don't lie on your belly. Just avoid exercises that require you to lie on your belly. If something tells you to lie on your belly, then just be on all fours instead and do the exercise on all fours. That's what I do. The other thing when it comes to modifications is you really want to avoid any exercise where there's a risk of falling. So things like skiing or gymnastics, like the obvious things. I mean, this should be a no-brainer, but like if there's any risk of falling, horseback riding is another one. I know some women who love horseback riding, and unfortunately they do have to stop when they're pregnant because there is a high falls risk with horseback riding. So any kind of sport that there's a risk of horseback riding, you just want to avoid. You don't want to take the risk of falling. And then the other thing is like any kind of contact sports like basketball or soccer or martial arts, like obviously you don't want to get hit or punched in the stomach or anything like that. So just avoid any contact sports. And the last thing is heat. So because your metabolic rate is operating at like 15 to 20% higher when you're pregnant, you heat up a lot faster as well. So pregnant women will know this, that like you just get hot faster. There's a higher risk of overheating. So when you're working out, just stay in tune with your body, right? Do you feel like you're overheating? Sweating is totally fine, by the way. So if you're sweating, that's a good thing. That's your body's way of cooling off. But if you're overheating, where you feel like your body's like burning up and you're not able to cool down, that's the time to step out of the room, get in front of an AC or something and cool your body down, because overheating is not going to be good for you or your baby. So this means for some women, they have to avoid things like hot tubs and saunas and hot yogas and all that. Again, it depends on your tolerance to heat. Personally, I can still do like hot showers and saunas only to like a certain extent. I just make sure I don't overheat. Hot yoga, I can still do hot yoga. That's because I have a high tolerance to heat and I'm used to it. I've just exposed myself to heat my whole life. But if you're not someone like that, I would just avoid hot tubs and saunas, anything that will raise your core body temperature too high and put you at risk for overheating. So if you just follow those rules, honestly, like you can pretty much do anything that you were doing pre-pregnancy during pregnancy. So I hope this is somewhat easing your mind about exercise during pregnancy, because I know so many women who've gotten pregnant and think that they just have to stop everything. So I just want to close off this episode by saying that like just because you're pregnant doesn't mean that you have to live in this like shrink wrap bubble for 9 months where you just can't push yourself, you can't do the things you were doing prior to pregnancy. I think that unfortunately scares women away from getting pregnant because they might love like movement so much and they're afraid that they have to give that up if they get pregnant. That's just not true. You don't have to give up movement. You can absolutely exercise as long as you follow some of the guidelines that I shared in the video earlier. So I just want you to know that you're safe to exercise. You should exercise if you can, and it will benefit you. You'll mentally feel better. There's studies to show that women who exercise during pregnancy have less anxiety, less depression, less postpartum depression as well, because movement is medicine. Movement is very healing to the body. When you get blood flow and lymph flow, your body is alive, it's thriving, and none of that changes when you're pregnant. Like it's not like just because you're pregnant, you don't need movement. You do still need movement. So highly encourage that if you get pregnant, you still continue to exercise, but you listen to your body and you follow the basic guidelines that I outlined in this video. And if you have any questions at all about exercise during pregnancy, please share it in the comments and I'd love to answer the questions for you. And I hope to see you in the next video.